Why are there Buddhist statues in Muslim Pakistan? And who was Ashoka? In the autobiography, I Am Malala, the children in her neighborhood go off to play in an area she describes like this. At that time, we lived in a part of town far away from the city center. Behind our house was a grassy lot scattered with mysterious ruins, statues of lions, broken columns of an old stupa, and hundreds of enormous stones that looked like giant umbrellas, where in the summer we played papartuni, a game of hide and seek. The stupa is a dome-shaped structure erected as a Buddhist shrine, as shown here, and are some of the many ruins found in Pakistan. But Malala didn't know that. In fact, most people in the town had little idea of the history of Buddhism in Pakistan. What are Buddhist shrines and ruins doing in a country that is 80% Muslim and 20% Hindu? In fact, Buddhism predates Islam by several hundred years, and it's a rather interesting story, and it involves the mysterious Ashoka. The beginnings of Buddhism in India were in the 5th century BC. While it wasn't yet a strong influence, over the centuries and more after Buddha's death, coincidentally in India, the number of followers began to grow. But it doesn't seem it made much headway until history intervened, ironically not through peace but through war and conquest. In the 4th century BC, the area known as modern Pakistan was under Persian rule by the great King Darius III, the divine king. Sadly for King Darius, Alexander the Great was greater and was headed east. As they faced each other in the confrontation of East and West, Darius saw that he was doomed and quickly departed, followed closely by his army. Here's the famous Greek mosaic version of what Darius III might have looked like at about that time. Probably very close. Alexander kept marching with his army, picking up all the villages and cities along the way. According to historian Michael Wood in the Story of India, the scene was something like this. Alexander finally stopped in the Punjab, near today's Amritsar. The Greek army reached the river Beas here in the beginning of September 326 BC. Marching in the middle of an army that wasn't dressed any longer like Greeks, but in combinations of the clothing they picked up across Asia, was Alexander. What a spectacle that must have been. Wood goes on to say, Alexander the Great, in his parade uniform, with his ram's horn helmet, with its great white plumes, and on his armor the head of a gorgon, which was supposed to turn to stone anybody who gazed into its eyes. One of the people in the crowd was an Indian youth by the name of Chandragupta. He was completely bowled over by Alexander, and, says Wood, by the glamour of Alexander's violence and the spectacle of imperialism. Chandragupta was inspired to become a powerful king who drove out the Greeks and established the great Mauryan Empire, shown in the map here. The city he built along the Ganges had multiple palaces and pleasure gardens and stretched for many miles on both sides of the great river. There were said to be 750 towers, says Wood. Buddhist teachings had begun to spread throughout this part of India. However, the grandson of this great king was probably quite impressed by the beauty and power manifest by all his grandfather had built. Once he inherited the throne from his father, Bindusara, he decided to make some conquests of his own. He was known as Ashoka. Ashoka had one aim when he became king, and that was to make his grandfather's kingdom even greater. His own father, Bindusara, had failed to annex the kingdom of Kalinga. So, in the 8th year of Ashoka's reign, he led his very first battle, and it was against Kalinga. The people of Kalinga and their king put up a fierce yet unsuccessful fight. There were so many dead, 100,000 Kalingans and 10,000 soldiers of Ashoka, that the river Daya was said to have run red with blood. When Ashoka saw what his lust for power had caused, he was reported to have been stricken with remorse. He turned his back on violence from that time forward and embraced Buddhism. With that, Buddhism grew rapidly. It became the state religion under Ashoka, and he became a great king. In fact, he was known as Ashoka the Great. Writer Chris Theolotti writes in the Ancient History Encyclopedia that prior to Ashoka's reign, there is very little written and very few artifacts of Buddhism. However, during Ashoka's, they are abundant. Buddhism became the state religion, and Ashoka followed its teachings and was greatly influenced by them in the way he ruled and how he had things built. Many of these were left behind in Pakistan and India as a silent testament to Buddhism's influence. And that's why there are so many Buddhist remnants in Pakistan today. After Ashoka died, Buddhism began a long decline in India. Michael Wood says in a country that had believed in millions of gods, it was hard to accept what was essentially an atheistic Buddhism, and was probably just a bridge too far for most Indians. In any case, it faded, and all that was left were the statues, the stupas, and long forgotten beliefs. Hinduism became dominant, and when Islam spread throughout the area, people just forgot about the Buddha. Two events took place that changed attitude towards the Taliban and also brought Pakistan's Buddhist past into the present. First was the shooting of 15-year-old schoolgirl Malala Yousafzai by emboldened Taliban fighters in 2012. The second, in that same year, was the destruction of the Buddhist archaeological site in Mingora, Malala's hometown. Drilling holes in the Buddha anciently carved on the side of the mountain, they placed sticks of dynamite in the drilled holes, igniting them and defacing quite literally the Buddha. It also ignited a tremendous outcry and one that the Pakistani government could no longer ignore. The Pakistani military drove the Taliban out of the Swat Valley by 2018. These attacks took place in 2012, but the government, in an effort to bring tourism back to the beautiful Swat Valley, enlisted the Italian archaeological mission in Pakistan to restore the site. This was also finally completed in the spring of 2018. We people of Swat have no words to thank the Italian archaeological mission for the restoration of the great Buddha, said Fazal Khalik, a local journalist covering culture in Swat. It was an irreparable loss to the rich cultural heritage of the area, so its restoration has brought such joy to the people. We are so grateful. Swat's most famous resident, the Nobel Peace Laureate, Malala Yousafzai, made an emotional return to her hometown of Mingora in April, 6 years after she was shot by the Taliban. The nonviolent spirit of Buddhism may have left its imprint at last.